is that it's a term that has been borrowed from the West, but has been largely misunderstood and misconstrued. There is also ambiguity in terms of how we understand inclusion. So there are lots and lots, there's a lot of mist that surrounds inclusion in our country. And yet, the important thing is that it is something that has found its place now in pretty much all our major legislative and policy markers, which include the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016 and most recently the National Education Policy 2020. So it is clearly a concept that we cannot ignore anymore. But at the same time, we must understand that we don't seem to really have a very sound understanding of what it means in our context. I will just take you through a little bit more of explanation on that and then go forward. Could you please switch to the next slide? Yeah. So just to draw a distinction between integration and inclusion, which are two terms that are more or less used synonymously in many contexts. Integration, which is a much older term, inclusion is something that we started to use only, say, about 2.5 decades ago in the Indian context. Integration has persisted for much, much longer. It used to be part of our national education policies and disability acts in the 80s as well. But integration and inclusion are two very, very distinct ideas and concepts, and it's very important that we draw a distinction between them. So, just a very brief sort of comparison between the two. Integration expects the child to fit into a system. Okay, integration expects that the child fits into an existing system. On the other hand, inclusion implies that this system will accommodate to meet the child's needs, right? So there is a very clear distinction between the two. So while integration expects that a child fits into the system, inclusion implies that the system itself will make certain kinds of accommodations to meet children's specific learning needs. In integration, there are a range of prerequisites which are considered to be essential in determining what is termed as the child's integrability, which means that the onus is on the child to prove that the child is integrable, meaning that the child can be accepted into the system. The system remains rigid, but the onus is on the child to prove its integrability. On the other hand, inclusion begins from a basic belief that education is a basic human right and the foundation for a equitable, just society, and hence it is for the system to adapt itself. Inclusion also is something that originated from the social model of disability, which I'm sure that all of you who are part of this program would be very, very aware of, basically assumes that disability is a socially constructed concept and that a person with disability's experience of it is constructed or is determined by the societal and the environmental factors and the societal factors rather than just the severity and nature of disability of the person. And hence inclusion assumes that the person has to adapt itself, and integration of course is largely a geographical and a locational kind of social integration rather than an inclusion or immersion into the system. And hence integration and inclusion are two very, very distinct ideas which we seem to generally misinterpret and more dangerously kind of use synonymously with one another. Next slide, please. So then the question arises, what really is inclusive education? There are many, many definitions of inclusive education. I've taken the simplest one here, which I hope will be clear to all of us and will resonate with us more than anything else. So inclusive education means that all children, irrespective of their learning needs, have equal opportunity to seek a meaningful and empowering learning experience with their peers. It's a very, very simple, fundamental idea where the belief is that a child irrespective of the learning need it has, belongs in a regular classroom and receives a meaningful and empowering learning experience just like its peers or just like anybody else. And likewise, therefore, an inclusive classroom is one where each child feels equally valued. Teachers are sensitive to the learning needs of the pupils, and the measures they adopt to support these needs benefit all children in the classroom, right? So that really is the essence of inclusive education. It's a very simple, basic idea. Of course, a million questions arise about its practice. How do you make it work? We all know that our system is not perfect. Our education system has many issues, problems, concerns. It is wide, it is diverse, it is also fractured at multiple levels. While we have been able to achieve access to a large extent now, the quality of education is a huge question mark. So then the question, of course, arises about what does it really mean to say that every child belongs in the regular classroom? How do you create this idea of an inclusive classroom? I know that it probably sounds like something that is utopian, something that's absolutely and optimal that we may or may not be able to achieve so easily. Next slide, please. But I do want to dwell upon it a little bit, and in whatever time that I have, I do want to take you through a couple of things that hopefully will make things a little more clearer. Children with learning disabilities in regular classrooms, well, this is something that you all might have a lot more experience with than I do. We know that children with learning disabilities challenge classroom teachers in multiple ways. So children with learning disabilities who are part of regular classrooms have challenges which really pose a lot of difficulties for their teachers. There's no doubt that they have unique learning characteristics and needs. They are poorly organized in their thinking and work habits. They have severe academic deficits, and of course also face a lot of social and emotional problems. They are often bullied and labeled and show certain kind of behavioral characteristics which are difficult for teachers to handle in the classrooms. And for these reasons, such children are definitely at a risk of dropping out of the regular school system, right? And educators, teachers, administrators find it difficult to help such children, as they are clearly unfamiliar with their specific learning needs and ways to work with them in the regular classroom. So we know that our teacher training programs for regular teachers do not necessarily equip them adequately to work with the children in regular classrooms. So clearly there is a lot of concern about how these children can be enabled to have a meaningful and empowering learning experience. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, the previous one. Sorry, you had switched. I didn't realize. Yeah, thanks. Having said all this, I think it's very important for us to understand that now, with the impetus that our national education policy has given, and also the RPWD Act, and also not just the legislative markers, but from a very human rights perspective, we need to understand that inclusion is an inevitability. We cannot say that children with with learning disabilities, because they cannot be helped in regular classrooms, should therefore drop out of it, right? So therefore, we have no choice but to say that children with learning disabilities belong in the regular school system, and schools in India must work towards creating learning environments that supports the learning of all children irrespective of their learning needs. So therefore, inclusion in that sense is an inevitability. One understands that there are challenges, one understands there are issues and concerns and lots of problems with respect to actually making it work. But we also must understand that now inclusion is the default. There is no choice but to make sure that children with learning disabilities, and of course here we are only talking about learning disabilities, but with all at least mild to moderate kind of disabilities belong in the regular school systems. And therefore teachers should work towards adopting practices and creating classroom environments that support the learning of children with learning disabilities. That means we don't really have a choice but for teachers to become cognizant of the learning needs of these children and therefore create classroom environments that support the learning of children with disabilities. Next slide, please. Yeah, so how do you make it happen now? Like I said, that this is not an easy task. There is no easy magic wand that you can just wave and make inclusion happen. But there are some broad principles, right? There are some broad principles that perhaps one should keep in mind, which might or which do work in my experience of having worked in this area for a couple of years now. I have seen some very good exemplars of how schools have adopted practices of inclusion and are able to work in inclusive classroom environments. And in our discussion, I would really be happy to hear something like that from the participants who are attending this program. I would really be looking forward to a discussion on that. So some broad principles of making inclusion work. The first one, of course, would be, I think Sir, who spoke before me, talked about barriers to inclusion, right? And I think one of the biggest barriers is acceptance. Acceptance of learning differences in children. And this is not just children with LD, but any child. Every child in the classroom is different. And I think accepting this fact and becoming aware of what those specific learning needs are by focusing on the learning need rather than the deficit. If you focus on what is it that I can do to help this child learn better rather than what is it that this child cannot do, I think is the biggest barrier to overcome for any teacher who's working with a child with learning disability. The other thing that's very important to understand is that inclusion is a process. It is not really an end or an outcome or an ideal that can be achieved overnight. So when I make statements like this, that inclusion is the inevitable way to go, that there is no other way of doing things, it might seem like something that is unachievable. But what we need to understand is that inclusion is really a path that or is a journey that we can all begin to take, and that it is a process but not really an end in itself. There is no end point to reach because it is not easy to realize. So we embark on that journey, go forward, see where we go, whatever is achievable, whatever is feasible, we make it work. And that is something that we need to realize at the systemic level, at the classroom level, at the teachers level, at the school level. The third is a very important point, which is a misconception that a lot of people have, which becomes a huge barrier, and which is that any kind of adaptation in curriculum and teaching that you make for children with learning disabilities actually can benefit all children in the class and not just those with special needs. And that's a huge thing that we need to understand. The argument that regular schools give, is that, oh, how can I make accommodations when there are only 3 or 4 children in my class or in my school? What about the other children? That's a huge argument that one hears, and which is also, I think, one of the biggest barriers towards making inclusion happen. What we need to understand is that the kind of adaptations in curriculum and teaching that we are talking about here can actually benefit all children in the classroom and not just those 3 to 4. Everybody understands that you cannot cater to the individual needs of each and every child. Our classrooms are like that. They are vast, they are diverse. You cannot cater to every child's needs. But if you do adopt certain practices which can benefit all the children in the classroom, then inclusion is clearly something that is achievable. The other one is also an important principle is that nobody can work alone in inclusion. There is no such thing as an isolated or one-off kind of one person driving this whole thing. You may be the person who drives it because of your passion, but nobody can work in inclusion alone. So what you need is a whole school approach. You need to bring all stakeholders together, whether it's teachers, whether it's the administration, of course, parents, and even the peer group. So the whole school approach, making everybody a part of this process, a stakeholder in this, is an extremely important step towards achieving inclusion. And then, of course, what do you do in the classroom when you're talking about adaptations in curriculum and teaching is you practice, at least one of the ways is practicing differentiation or differentiation of instruction, which is something that I would like to elaborate a little more now as we go forward. Right. These are some broad principles of differentiated instruction that I have learned to use. Now I teach them to my master's students, and they apply them in their pedagogy classrooms also. The broad principles are, and which I think those of you who work with children with learning disabilities, either individually or in classrooms, my sense is that a lot of this will resonate with you. And this is not rocket science. Anybody can apply these differentiated instruction principles. And if you keep what I said earlier in mind, that differentiated or curriculum and pedagogical adaptations that you adopt benefit all children, my sense is that you would be able to see how, right? So one of the principles is focus on the essentials. That means you identify the absolutely essential key concepts that are to be taught, the principles and skills of each topic and subject, and focus on them, right? So within the classroom, we all know that for children with learning disabilities, one of the biggest challenges is to deal with huge amounts of text. They cannot deal with huge amounts of text. If everybody else can read only can read 10 pages, these children can read only 1 page, right? Yeah, I'm going to finish in 5 minutes. The other principle is accept, embrace, and attend to student differences. That is, we've already spoken about that it is important to accept that difference is part of the human condition and we should acknowledge these differences. The third is a very important point, which is that assessment and instruction are inseparable from each other. So whatever instruction that you plan should inform assessment, and whatever assessment you plan should inform instruction. So assessment should not only be used to evaluate children, but it should also serve as feedback to the instruction. The third one is that all students participate respectfully in the classroom. That means there is some basic fundamental ideas that everyone has to master, everyone has to achieve, and the teacher respects every child for doing that and appreciates what the children are doing. And then teachers and students work together flexibly. And this is also something that I don't have to necessarily emphasize on, because you all have experience of working with children with LD, that flexibility is the key. Flexibility in terms of task completion, in the kind of tasks that you give them, the amount of time that you give them, the instructional methods, assessing, all of that. So flexibility is the key, which benefits every child in the classroom, not just those with LD. Yeah, please, next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. I'm just going to conclude by saying that it's important to define and interpret inclusive education in the context of our education system with all its limitations and strengths. I also want to reiterate and very strongly that children with learning disabilities belong in regular classrooms. There is no reason why we should push them out of the regular school system. Important to overcome the barriers to inclusion, which are attitudinal, of poor awareness, lack of training, rigidity of the system. I think it's really important, and that the inclusive practices benefit all children, and adopting practices like differentiation should become part of everyday teaching practices in our classroom, and not just for any not just when there are children with disabilities in our classrooms. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and patience.
Thank you, Dr. Muna. It was a pleasure listening to you and a very